Many sports stars turn into gambling, alcohol or drugs during and after their careers. Why do you think so many sports stars have become flawed down the years?
Well, I just think this is two things really. Number one, they've got loads of money floating around, and number two, they got loads of time floating around. You add the two together and you've got a bit of a vicious cocktail really. You've got, some young guys who often are sort of living away from their families and things. They've got more money they know what to do with and all this spare time. So it's not really a surprise when you think of it, human nature, that they're going to turn to alcohol, drugs, gambling, whatever it may be, yeah.
And when a flawed sports star is involved in a sort of fall from grace, what ethically would you do in preparation for covering a story like that?
Well, I think the first thing you should have in mind always is just to make sure you're telling the truth. As a journalist, it's key. If you've been given information about something a sports star has done, or anybody's done, it's not just a sports star, you need to make sure you're verifying your facts first and foremost. You need to make sure that you're being sensitive to the situation. You need to make sure that you're also managing your relationship with them, and then the relationship you have with them, the relationship you have with their clubs and their employers. And also just making, you've got a responsibility to your readers to make sure that, the story you're telling is the right one. And that, you're not sort of listening to people that might have an agenda against this particular person for any reason.
And in terms of flawed sports stars, we've seen down the years Paul Gascoigne, Tony Adams, who really come to mind. What are the ethical issues for a journalist when covering those sort of stories on individuals that are that high profile? What are the issues that you can come across as a journalist?
Well, I think it happens fairly regularly that you'll get a report or a photograph, particularly these days with social media and that sort of thing, that the sports stars have done something, and it's clearly there's a public interest in play there. It's also, you've got to balance that with the interest of the public. You've got a loyalty to your readers, and I probably think that's probably the first thing you're thinking, and a loyalty to your employers, which is also important. But ultimately, as I said earlier, I think the key thing with any story, particularly something as sensitive as this, you just need to make absolutely sure that your facts are straight, first and foremost. And the rest of it looks after itself.
And what situations have you personally been involved in when covering such a story?
I think the one that sticks in my mind was I did a story of former Cardiff City striker Ross McCormack, who got caught drink driving. Right. And it was actually a colleague of mine that got the tip off from the police that this had happened, and it was this guy. And I remember we spoke about this for hours, maybe even days, about what we do with it, because it seemed at the time like there was more to it. First things first, we had a sort of a fractious relationship with the club. Cardiff City, Dave Jones was the manager. Didn't particularly get on with him very well. And we needed to make sure we kept our relationship up with the club, because that was where we sold a lot of newspapers with our Cardiff City coverage. We got a lot of web traffic from our Cardiff City coverage. And our relationship with them was very important. Also, we were both fans of the club. And it was a time the team were pushing for promotion. And we knew if this got out, the club would have to do something. They'd have to discipline McCormack, probably suspend him, which would mean he'd probably be out of action for a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
We also had to make sure we had a relationship with the police, particularly the people who were within the police that had given us this tip off, so we had to manage that as well. But ultimately, it came down to we just had to tell the truth. We knew our journalistic integrity kicked in. And it was a case of this story really is a public interest one, because irrespective of everything else you might think of, what you've got here essentially is a criminal who's endangered the public by going out and drink driving, irrespective of everything else. And as long as we could verify that was what happened, then it turned out we had to run the story, and it had to go on the front page, and it had to dominate the news agenda for that week, whether we liked it or not. And it turned out, the guy got suspended, and it did affect results on the pitch, and all that stuff came into it. But at the end of the day, we couldn't let those things dominate. We couldn't let them have the final say.
And in terms of that story, in that particular story, what impact did it have on you as a journalist and your organisation?
Well, massive one, because the very next press conference, Dave Jones wanted to speak to the people that had written that story specifically. So it was like it sort of transcended the work that most people do. It was like, stop the press conference. I want to discuss this because this is massive. This is important. So, bear in mind as well that we were both covering the club, or covering that as a patch, and we were fans of the club. It was a very difficult thing to have to deal with, having the manager calling you out in a press conference, and then having subsequent. I don't think we actually got banned from the club for it, but certainly made our relationship with the club very difficult. Also, sometimes we think we're doing our readers a service by telling these important stories, but actually the readers, there's certain elements of the readership were big fans of the club that didn't want to see the guy getting suspended. Yeah. So it had quite a massive, so many things to take into account. But I mean, as I said right at the start, reality is you've got to teach them the truth. You've got to stick to your principles.
You talked about your principles there. When sort of writing or reporting on a story such as that, do you firstly think of how the individual will be affected, or is that something that you need to sort of see past as a journalist?
No, I think you've got to take it into consideration. I mean, obviously, when you're affecting people's careers, this is big stuff. It's important. You could potentially ruin somebody, particularly in this case if you've got a sports star that's doing things they shouldn't have. I say, first of all, you need to be absolutely right in what you're doing, but yeah, you do. You need to be very aware of the impact that it's going to have beyond just you telling a good story, very definitely.
And in terms of your ethics as a journalist, are they extremely important when writing a story such as that one?
Yeah, I think it's paramount, and I don't think stories just such as that one. I think any stories. I think a good journalist is built on being ethically sound, and you've got a responsibility to protect people you're writing about, people you're writing with, and most importantly, the people giving you the information in the first place.
And finally, what would your advice be to a young journalist when maybe they eventually come into contact with a story that may call their ethical beliefs into question? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, first thing, don't get too excited. Everyone feels the buzz when you've got a great story and it's correct, and everything's fallen into place, and this could be one that changes your career forever. But it's easy to get overexcited in telling the story and to forget the ethics and the principles behind what you're doing. Just take a breath, pause, and make sure everything's absolutely right and verified before you go and publish it, or even before you tell your editor, I would say.
Yeah.